On December 9, 1946, an American military tribunal initiated proceedings in what would come to be known as the doctor's trial. 23 leading German physicians were charged with what Chief Prosecutor Telford Taylor described as murders, tortures, and other atrocities committed in the name of medical science. Taylor continued by stating that the victims of these crimes are numbered in the hundreds of thousands. For the most part, they are nameless dead. To their murderers, these wretched people were not individuals at all. They came in wholesale lots and were treated worse than animals. After close to 140 days of proceedings, including 85 witness accounts and approximately 1,500 documents submitted as evidence, on August 20th, 1947, 16 of these doctors were found guilty. 7 were sentenced to death by hanging. Later that year, in response to the testimony describing the murder and torture perpetrated by people who took an oath to protect and heal, the Nuremberg Code was published. The code consisted of 10 principles meant to govern ethical human subject experimentation, beginning with a statement that served as a stern rebuke of the blatant lack of concern for the fundamental moral, ethical, and legal concepts at the heart of any form of medical research or practice. Quote, "The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential," end quote. By emphasizing the value of not only consent, but informed consent, the Nuremberg Code revolutionized science and medicine by giving the patient subject a voice and a say in what happened to his or her own body. The resulting concept of patient autonomy challenged the traditional views of medical paternalism that had dominated healthcare for so long. The doctor's trial and the subsequent publication of the Nuremberg Code brought the relationship between doctor and patient, scientist and subject, to the forefront of the emerging fields of bioethics and international human rights. Evidence presented during the trial, including testimony from the defendants themselves, underscored the breakdown in this essential relationship that led to the medical community's participation in every aspect of the labeling, persecution, and eventual mass murder of millions of innocent victims. As the scholar George Annis pointed out, by abdicating their responsibility to the individual patient and becoming caretakers of the state, educated professionals who should have been dedicated to promoting health, alleviating suffering, and protecting life became the active instruments of torture and death. As the deadly medicine creating the master race exhibit demonstrates, the transformation from healers to killers was systematic, all-encompassing, and a direct result of the dehumanization of those deemed unfit by eugenic theory and political ideology. The basic concept underlying Nazi racial policies was that there existed certain groups of people who were genetically unfit, whose lives were of no value to society. Their mere existence was a threat to the strength of the nation, and their ability to reproduce would further pollute the German gene pool. Science and medicine alone could provide a method for curing what ailed the nation by ministering to the strong and ridding the world of its inferior elements. Treating the individual was never the goal of Nazi medicine. Instead, physicians were viewed as the protectors of the future of humankind. Scientific theory and political ideology merged to create a group of sub-human beings whose worth was determined by their ability to contribute to society through forced labor or by serving as experimental subjects, thus creating the only example of medically sanctioned genocide in history. The doctor's trial and the Nuremberg Code were not just about unethical experiments performed on vulnerable subjects. The scope of their historical significance and modern relevance goes much further. These events were about the essential relationship between doctors and patients, upon which the entire foundation of medicine rests. They were about the abuse of power perpetrated by people who took an oath to protect and heal. They were about describing, documenting, and attempting to understand how healers became killers in order to ensure that it would never happen again. The doctor's trial provided a record of the murder and torture that took place in the name of science and medicine. The Nuremberg Code serves as a reminder to healthcare professionals of what can happen when the promise of scientific progress is placed ahead of the Hippocratic responsibility to first do no harm. I stand here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 70 years after the doctor's trial and the publication of the Nuremberg Code. And I wonder what we have learned and how we can ensure that these lessons are not forgotten. Increasing challenges face today's healthcare community. As we saw during World War II, there is often a negative correlation between scientific progress and ethical behavior. The promise of advances in medical science that can cure diseases, extend the length of our lives, or create a new generation that is better and brighter may seem enticing, but these advances can also threaten the moral core of our society. Developments in genetics are making it possible to isolate and identify the specific genes that cause disease. Medical experimentation can then allow us to potentially eliminate these genetic defects and create future generations free of certain hereditary illnesses. Now, these are not inherently negative endeavors. In fact, a world without cancer, or multiple sclerosis, or Parkinson's would be nothing short of miraculous. However, as always, there is a flip side. Medical genetics has the potential to foster prejudice and discrimination. James Watson, one of the co-founders of the structure of DNA, argued there will be important debates in the future as we gain a fuller understanding of the influence of genetics on human attributes and behavior. The danger of using our differences to divide us must not be overlooked. Using medical genetics as a scientific justification for racism, homophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, or the stigmatization of mental or physical illness cannot be ignored. In Nazi Germany, the promise of creating a better society, one that was free of its unfit elements, transformed the practice of medicine. Instead of believing that they had a responsibility to protect these vulnerable members of society, physicians instead believed that it was their duty to exterminate them for the good of the nation. While being careful never to suggest too close of a comparison between Nazi medicine and modern healthcare, how can we trust that this time will be different? That this time the medical community will protect the weak, infirm, and vulnerable members of society despite the rapid advances being made within medical science. This is why we must stop and look backward at the sins of our past if we want to be able to move forward in an ethical manner. The Maimonides Institute for Medicine, Ethics, and the Holocaust was founded on that very idea, that in order to protect the future, we must reflect upon the past. Telford Taylor emphasized the importance of this when he stated, "It is our deep obligation to all peoples of the world to show why and how these things happened. It is incumbent upon us to set forth with conspicuous clarity the ideas and motives which move these defendants to treat their fellow men as less than beasts. The perverse thoughts and distorted concepts which brought about these savageries are not dead. They cannot be killed by force of arms. They must not become a spreading cancer in the breast of humanity. They must be cut out and exposed." As Chief Justice Robert Jackson, Chief U.S. Prosecutor, argued in his opening statement before the International Military Tribunal, the wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated. As I stand here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 70 years after the doctor's trial and the publication of the Nuremberg Code, our challenge as healthcare professionals is clear. First, we must revisit our past, difficult as that may be. Not just the Holocaust, but the Hippocratic Oath and the foundations of human rights upon which modern democracy were established. Issues of equity, access to care, mental health services, and the treatment of vulnerable populations continue to plague modern medicine. Developments in beginning and end-of-life care are challenging the face of healthcare policy. In response to economic, political, and social forces, the pendulum is swinging back to an era where the emphasis of medicine was on caring for the population rather than the individual. As a result, the relationship between medicine and politics is more complex than ever. To paraphrase the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, all people are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Reflecting on the historical ideals of equality based solely on the simple characteristic of personhood can help lay the groundwork for the creation of a righteous medicine, a system of healthcare with dignity and respect for the value of human life at its core. As we turn from the past to the present and we look forward to our future, we must find a way to balance this core ideal with the need for scientific progress. The Maimonides Institute for Medicine, Ethics, and the Holocaust believes in the necessity of instilling a personal and professional moral ethos within the healthcare community that values the dignity of human life above the promise of scientific or societal progress. In order to do this, we must revisit the lessons of Nuremberg. As we learn from the trials, the boundaries between medical practice, bioethics, healthcare policy, and human rights are fluid. The publication of the Nuremberg Code was a response to the murder and torture perpetrated under the guise of science and medicine during World War II. As the number of Holocaust survivors continues to dwindle, and the first-hand accounts of these horrors cease to exist, we now, more than ever, have a responsibility as a community to ensure that these stories and lessons are never forgotten. As I stand here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 70 years after the doctor's trial in the Nuremberg Code, it is time. It is time for the healthcare and human rights communities to join together and take a stand. As Annis argued on the 50th anniversary of Nuremberg, it is time to go back to the beginning and examine how the best and brightest people in medical science could become parties to evil. It is time to examine the historical, social, and legal basis of their profound powers and influence, including the tragic example of the exploitation and abuse of those powers by the foremost medical and research communities of the day. The medical profession needs to examine what can happen when medicine is influenced by political ideology. It is time. It is time for us to reinforce our obligation to those whose lives were changed irrevocably at the hands of Nazi medicine by incorporating these lessons into the curricula for all types of healthcare education, for those studying to become healthcare providers, and for those already in the field. It is time for us to draft a code of ethics for a modern system of healthcare that encompasses our needs in 2017 and beyond. An ethical code that transcends boundaries to include medical practice, human rights, bioethics, and healthcare policy. Because this is not an individual issue. This is not a Jewish issue. This is not a Catholic issue. It's not an issue for Democrats. It's not an issue for Republicans. It's something that affects us all. It is a global issue, but most importantly, it is a human issue. So as I stand here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 70 years after the doctor's trial and the publication of the Nuremberg Code, I implore all of you to join me and the Maimonides Institute for Medicine, Ethics, and the Holocaust in pledging our commitment to the creation of a healthcare community founded on the ideals of equality, respect, and human dignity that exists apart from the political, social, or economic climate of the times. These candles signify our promise to the millions of people who became victims of medical and human rights abuses because of their race, religion, political affiliation, socioeconomic class, mental or physical status. Your stories will not be forgotten as we pledge never again. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. Amanda Caleb, the organizer of these events at Misericordia University, to light the first candle. The remainder of the candles will be lit by members of the interfaith community here at Misericordia.
I'd like to invite up Rabbi Kaplan and Rabbi Lerner. I'd like to invite up Sister Jean Maceros and Sister Cindy Marsh. I'd like to invite out Dr. Alnaki. I'd like to invite up Dr. Patricia Haber-Rice. And finally, I'd like to invite up Dr. Matthew Winia.
As we stand together, all of us, representatives from different faiths, different professions, different generations, the time is now. We must not let what happened during the Holocaust be forgotten. I ask you to join with us in a moment of silence, in solidarity, and in remembrance of those who lost their lives. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity, and thank you for being a part of a movement that aims to ensure that what took place during the Holocaust is never repeated.